Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching our live briefing for Tuesday, October 13th. Today, I have a couple brief comments, and then you'll hear from Debra Jacobsen, and then Chaplain David Curtis has our pastoral care segment today. Quickly talk about just the COVID situation here on campus. As you'll recall, last week on Tuesday, we shared that we had a security employee who had tested positive for COVID-19 and was sent out to be in quarantine. And we heard later last week he's actually pretty sick, so we're hoping to get better news that he's recovering, but we'll know more hopefully in the next day or two. And then on Friday last week, we learned that a CNA, a certified nursing assistant who'd worked on our third floor in the Parsons Health Center tested positive. She was tested as part of our routine weekly testing. So she was tested on Wednesday morning, and on Friday, real early morning, we learned that she was positive, so she was sent home. She was completely asymptomatic and had no idea, so she's sent home and she's in quarantine. I believe we currently have 3 employees who are at home recovering. Thankfully, we have no residents at this point who have tested positive, and so that's wonderful news. That's the best news possible. We are quarantining our residents on the first floor and the third floor in Parsons Health Center. So unfortunately, visitation there has been suspended for those 2 floors. The first floor will, if all continues to go well, and we expect it to, first floor will come out of quarantine on Friday this week, and then it'll be another week or so after that for the third floor. Again, this week, we are testing the residents in Parsons and all of our healthcare center staff, and anyone who needs to work in Parsons will be tested this week as well. I think they started that. Well, it'll be tomorrow and Thursday that we'll be doing that testing. We are still waiting on a few results, but so far, everything that's come back from all the testing we've done since last week has been negative, so we're real thankful for that. The other issue I wanted to talk to you today about is the effect that COVID-19 is having on Westminster, Canterbury, Richmond as a whole. As a leadership team, management team, we've been focused for the last 6 or 7 months now on managing and balancing some competing forces, and I want to talk about those just briefly. First, the most important thing we've been trying to manage is keeping the community of residents and staff safe and well. You hear from us every single live briefing about the efforts that we have underway here to keep this community safe. And we are quite honestly doing a pretty good job, and we're proud of the battle that we fought. It is kind of a nonstop battle. It has been from the beginning, but we feel like we're doing a pretty good job. The residents, have been very compliant and very supportive. Staff have been compliant and have worked their tails off to make it all work, and so we're real thankful for that. The second thing we've been trying to manage, and it does compete with the first a little bit, is to continue to sell contracts and move new residents into this community. It is very important that we continue to move forward, reopening the community and getting some of these programs and services running, and continue to move people into our community. We've seen our sales and new move-ins rebound significantly. We've had a very good number of residents move in. We've met with a number of them over the last few weeks, and their experience, while a bit unusual given the circumstances with which they moved into the community, odd situation, by and large, their experience has been a good one. And so to all the residents who've been here, I thank you for welcoming them and supporting them and making them part of this community. And to the new residents, we want to welcome you. It's very important for a community like this to continue to move people into this community. And so we feel like we've done a pretty good job over the last 7 months of getting that process of sales restarted. Very different than the way we did it before, but Stacy and her team in the sales office have done a fabulous job. And then the third thing we've been trying to manage is the business of running a continuing care retirement community. This business and seniors living and nursing care is under a good deal of stress because of the impact of the virus. Quite honestly, all businesses are under a significant amount of stress given the current conditions that everyone's having to operate under. Because of that, we've had to make some difficult choices and some difficult decisions over the last few months. Today I want to talk just for a couple minutes about the effect COVID-19 is having on the Westminster Canterbury business. There's an ongoing cost of this pandemic that impacts us really in two very important ways. The first, and probably the most important, arguably the most important, is the effect that the pandemic has had on our workforce. Our staff have been under a great deal of strain and stress because of the effect of working in these conditions, working in a mask all day long, being tested regularly, having to be quarantined whenever they have symptoms, and then living a life where they have to stay or try to stay well and so that they can keep coming to work. That's had an effect on our workforce, and we're very thankful for everybody's efforts. Unfortunately, we've had some wonderful staff leave us, and they've left us for a variety of reasons. We exit interview everybody that will sit with us, and we find out why is it that they're leaving, and the majority, vast majority, have left for issues, valid issues related to either COVID-19, issues like they have an underlying health condition and they can't work here, or they have fear of getting sick, and certainly early on we saw some of that. We've had a good number of staff need to leave because they care for or live with an elder who they have to protect that person. They can't come to work and get sick, so they've stepped away from this kind of work because of that. Some have been impacted by the challenges of virtual school for their children, which is certainly a challenge and not an easy challenge for families. And then some, especially in dining, have left because VCU closed. And you know, we hire up students, and then the school goes virtual, and those students aren't available to us. And so that's had an effect. We've had others and a couple of key individuals leave us for other opportunities, which we understand and we wish them well. And then there have been a few who have been terminated for not complying with our rules. And unfortunately, but it's just the way it is, in this environment, you have to follow the rules. It's the same for residents, the same for staff. We can't have we can't have staff who won't follow the rules. They're for everyone's safety. And so, unfortunately, there's been a few of those. We are very actively recruiting to fill the vacant positions. We certainly have a good number of positions to fill in housekeeping and dining, a couple in engineering, and then a good number in nursing. Staff have worked hard to fill those holes and keep those keep the process moving forward. It's frustrating, I understand, from the residents' perspective, because we have to shuffle schedules, and you may not have your normal staff you're used to seeing because we're covering a lot of open shifts. But we've been making some very good progress in recruiting, and we've gotten some new staff on board, and we have more in the works. And we get them on board, and then we got to get them trained up so that they're up to the standard. And that takes time, but we're moving in the right direction, and we're happy with where we're headed. The second effect that the pandemic is having is related to our budget. Responding to the requirements of keeping this community safe and testing staff every single week comes at a significant financial cost to this organization. Yesterday, we had our resident relations committee meeting, and I shared with your resident association leadership that recently we implemented some limited staff reductions in a couple of areas, really non-resident care positions, We had to do it because of budget constraints, and there are significant costs that we have to bear to keep this community screened and safe and tested and all the rest. And unfortunately, we had to make a couple small changes. We do not anticipate we'll have to make any further reductions, and as we come out the other side of this, we'll be in a better position to make changes. But unfortunately, we had to modify our budget a little bit to be in compliance with the budget requirement. Some schedules and some resident programs will have to change a little bit to accommodate for the impact of these reductions. Certainly on behalf of the management team and myself, I appreciate your patience and your understanding while we work through these changes. It's hard for staff to pick up these things, and some things we have to do less of because we're doing a lot more of other things. And so that's where we find ourselves at this point. And all in all, it's a pretty good story. We're making good progress. We're making good headway towards keeping this community safe, and we're going to come out the other side of this a very strong organization, and people still want to move in and be part of the community. So we're, all in all, it's a very good story. It's just, we don't talk a lot at the live briefing or at any of these meetings about the business, and I do want you to understand the management team is working hard to keep making good decisions and move the organization forward. So I appreciate your time today. That's all I have. Next up is Debra Jacobsen. She's going to talk to you a little bit about visitation and a couple other things.
Good afternoon. Today I want to speak to you about a couple different restrictions that have been lifted, and I want to start with the overnight family visitation in the independent living. As of yesterday, overnight visitors are permitted in the independent living residencies. The process for overnight visitation is different from the daily visitation occurring between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. This new process applies to all independent living overnight visitors moving forward. A maximum of 2 overnight visitors per resident or resident couple is permitted. There are a few things you need to know. Overnight visitation needs to be pre-arranged through the Resident Services Department by calling 264-6082. One important restriction that we do have on these overnight visitations is that anyone visiting our residents overnight must present to us a negative COVID-19 test result from testing that has occurred within 3 days of the visit. We feel like this is extremely important, and this is the way we have been able to maintain a safe and healthy environment by having the testing done among our staff and our residents. So we do appreciate the compliance in that area. I know you're extremely excited about the fact that your family's going to come and be visiting with you, and we thank you for in advance for the family members that are taking heed and taking what restrictions we have seriously, and we hope you enjoy your visit. All these guidelines are being provided to you in a memo that was placed in your box just earlier today. Any other questions, just give us a call. The next subject has to do with voting. The elections they're right around the corner now. Residents residing in Henrico County here at Westminster, Canterbury may vote between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. in the Commons. This is on Tuesday, November the 3rd. For your safety and in order to keep everybody safe and healthy, the independent living, the assisted living, and the health care will all be scheduled voting times. All independent living residents should plan to vote between 6 a.m. and 1 p.m., take a little bit of a break, and come back between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. if you need to vote. All assisted living and Parsons Healthcare residents should plan to vote between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. We ask you to enter through the set of doors that are nearest the center lobby and to exit through the doors closest to the foundation hall. That's once you've cast your vote. If you applied for an absentee ballot, we strongly encourage you to return it via mail or place it in the drop box that will be outside on the day of the election. Residents who live in the city of Richmond will vote in their assigned precincts. Please refer to the memo from Resident Services that was placed in your internal boxes on yesterday. I hope all of this information is helpful to you. And again, there are memos and guidelines that have been placed in your boxes for any further questions, but you can always call Resident Services. Again, I hope you have a great day. Up next is David Curtis.
Good afternoon. I'm David Curtis with the Pastoral Care Office, and a few programming notes from Pastoral Care. This coming Thursday at 10:30 a.m. on TV 970, we will have our weekly Thursday worship, and Reverend Dr. Rebecca Weaver, a resident here, will be our preacher. So please join us again Thursday morning, 10:30 a.m. on TV 970. And our service of dedication for the Spiritual Center will be shown on TV 970 this coming Sunday, October the 18th at 4 p.m. and again at 7:30 p.m. It will also be reshown next week at 7:30 in the evening. Bulletins for the service will be available in the tower and center lobbies by Wednesday afternoon. And if you would like one placed in your box, please call me at extension 5179 or Vanessa Perry at extension 1502. Again, 5179 to reach me and 1502 to reach Vanessa. And our last reminder for today, our last programming note, our David F. Peters lecture will occur on November the 11th at 4 p.m. with Heath Hardage Lee. Pastoral Care has a few copies of her book, The League of Wives, in the Spiritual Library, and we encourage you to check one out and read it before the Peters lecture. You may also submit questions to the Pastoral Care Office that you would like us to ask Mrs. Lee following her address. The questions do need to be submitted in advance to Vanessa Perry by October the 21st. Again, those questions need to be in by October the 21st. We hope that you will enjoy the book, and we are looking forward to our 2020 Peters lecture. And now our scripture today comes from the 21st chapter of the book of Revelation. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out from heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. God will dwell with them. They will be God's people, and God will be with them. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more, mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I have to tell you all that I'm not overly fond of the book of Revelation, but I find a tremendous amount of hope in this passage, and I think that hope is what I need most these days. The first thing that I find that is so hopeful is this promise that God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. I have always read this as God will comfort us and heal us. He will somehow hold us and comfort us so that our tears will stop. That is until I was offered a new and perhaps better insight from a friend. Instead of God simply wiping away our tears, a dear friend told me that in this passage she hears a promise that God will remove all things that cause us to cry. God will remove death and hurt. God will remove our egos and our bitterness. God will remove injustice and hatred. God will remove hunger and poverty. God will remove those things that cause us and others to weep. There is a second promise that I hear amongst others, and that promise is that God will renew us. He who sits on the throne says, I am making all things new. The passage does not say that I'm making all new things, but I'm making all things new. In those words, I hear God affirming the goodness of God's creation and that God will, in fact, renew us. And when I say us, that includes you and that includes me. Well, saying it a different way, it's not just y'all, but all y'all. And for that we say, thanks be to God. Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, renew us and make us new. Remove those things that hinder us from being more loving and more accepting of others. Remove those things that cause us to weep and give us grace to live into these divided and tumultuous days. Let us see you in all who we meet, and may we strive to love them completely as you love us. Amen. Thank you for joining us today. Please join us on Thursday for our next update at 3 p.m.